With just 2 months away from the South African general elections, the Independent Electoral Commission's statistics show that over 27 million eligible voters are registered for the upcoming polls. Over 50% of the figure is made up of women, while 11 million of the voters are youth. At the polls, 3 ballot papers for national, provincial and regional candidates will be availed to voters. Let's discuss all this with Elections Consulting Agency of Africa founder and CEO Lulu White. Lulu, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chaba. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, the current IEC voter registration stats show that over 27 million South Africans are registered to vote. Does this figure translate to actual voter turnout come election day on 29 May? And what has history shown us in this regard?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chaba, it doesn't. If we look at the previous data, we'll see that, for example, for the first 1994, the first democratic election, there was a voter turnout of 86.88%. And you know how the IEC actually calculates voter turnout is they take the number of people who have voted divided by the number of people who actually registered. So there was a really high turnout in 1994. In 2019, we saw a sharp decline in that. I mean, from 86% to 66%. So, and in the local government elections, which was 2 years ago, we saw that voter turnout dropping to a 46%. So that makes you realize that while the voter registration stats may be high, translating that into people going to the polls to actually cast their vote has actually been quite difficult over the years. It's actually, we've taken a sharp decline in that regard.
And over 50% of the registered voters are women. Is there a particular notable reason for this?
Yeah, certainly. Women make up about 53, 54% of the population of South Africa. So obviously it would make sense that also in terms of the voter registration stats that be much higher than the male counterparts. That's precisely just that. It's just that there's a lot more women than there are men. That's why we see a higher registration status there.
All right. Now, with only 2 months remaining to the polls, would you say there's enough voter education implemented, especially for first-time voters?
Okay, so this is a very tricky question because you see, voter education, in my view, is an approach that should be done both by civic society and the IEC. Well, civic society also including political parties. As far as the IEC is concerned, we have seen initiatives online and also, I mean, on TV. We've seen the XA campaign that basically talks to attracting young voters, attracting people that are coming to vote for the first time. They've gone through a lot of work as far as making people understand why it's important to vote. However, if you're not somebody who's online, you really don't see those initiatives, do you? So it becomes very difficult to gauge whether young people who are first-time voters have been able to interact with some of the online campaigns and they've been able to engage effectively on that. Standing from where I'm sitting, I understand that there's three ballot papers in this election. You've got the national one, the provincial one, and the regional one. Now, I feel that not enough is being communicated. You still get people that are still very confused as to why is the regional voter, why the regional boundary is the same to the provincial boundaries. How will they be able to calculate? How will they see that their votes have actually translated into something? So while one can argue that the IEC has done decently as far as making sure that there is voter education, I do believe that there'll always be a need for more voter education. I think the biggest challenge with voter education currently in the country is that civic education seems to be something that's only reserved for election, and I think that is a very big mistake. I think there should be voter or civic education initiatives any time of the year throughout the 5 years, because after elections there's other things that need to be happening. People need to be able to hold their leaders accountable without necessarily going to a protest and burning buildings down. So I think while the IEC has done work as far as voter education, and it's commendable, I think there can always be more voter education. But also let's not, political parties also need to be held accountable. What are political parties doing as far as voter education, except going to people and saying, vote for me because I will do 1, 2, 3 for you? Voter education should also be something that political parties also engage in order to actually teach their constituencies and their voters why they need to vote, why it's important that they go out to vote. And I think that is where it seems to be lacking.
Yeah, and I hear you on the fact that voter education is, or at least should be, a collective effort. Does this in any way, good or bad, reflect on the IEC's readiness for the polls?
Look, it doesn't reflect on the IEC's readiness for the polls. I think one thing we need to understand is that representative democracy is all our responsibility. The IEC plays its role in accordance to Chapter 9 of the Constitution. So it's a mandate for them to actually do the work that they're doing. They're forced by law to do the work that they're doing. And as far as meeting those obligations, they are meeting those obligations, and they are ready to have these. Elections. Also, if we have to borrow from previous history, I think we can really be confident as a country that the IEC is ready for these elections. They generally have 5 years to plan for these elections. The last 90 days is just, wrapping up processes. So I really do believe that the IEC is ready to conduct these elections. They're ready to go to the polls. Of course, no system is perfect.
Let's talk about the youth. I mean, in rough estimates, about 11 million young people are registered to vote. Is this number an indication of a decline in youth voter apathy?
No, unfortunately it isn't, Masichaba, and I'll tell you why. It's because if we have to look at historical data, you'll see that in terms of our census, and in accordance to our census, we are up to 20. How many is it? 61 million people, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not too sure about the figure. And that basically is a sharp increase in terms of the youth. So South Africa is becoming much more youthful as a country. And if you look at the stats throughout the years, you'll also see once again that we've grown as a country. While the population has grown, obviously voter registration stats would also grow with that population. They'll be higher with that when it comes to that population. The biggest challenge with the youth is that they are not able to find expression. The young people of South Africa can't find expression for themselves within the context of elections. They've always viewed elections as something outside of them, not something that they should be a part of. They've always felt that people that, political parties do not speak to them. They speak at them. They make these promises, delusions of grandeur, and they never deliver on these promises. No young person has ever come back and said, you know what, yes, I got whatever it is that was promised to me by political parties. So they actually see themselves out of the process. High unemployment rates have also discouraged young people from actually wanting to participate in anything that is politics related. One can only hope that this year, perhaps the figure, will see a better picture as far as voter turnout is concerned with young people going to the polls this year. And obviously there's a lot of factors. There's a number of younger political parties or political parties that appear as though they're interested in matters pertaining to youth interests. However, in the past we have seen that you see large numbers as far as voter registration, but when it comes to the polls, you don't see young people there.
All right. In closing, Lulu, and very briefly, what is the desirable implementation process that we should be seeing in the next 2 months and on the day of the elections, at least for a free and fair election?
Okay, the desirable implementation process, I think with regards to the Electoral Commission of South Africa that already has the mandate, I think that perhaps we have noticed, I mean, this is somebody sitting in Gauteng, obviously, but we have seen a lot of violence, particularly in KZN, with regards to, I'm not certain whether it's, people are fighting for political space or not, but I do think that perhaps this is something that the IEC would need to do, a study on and try and see what is that can be done to make people feel safer. I do think that, over the last few months, we've seen a lot of, escalated type of violence that's been coming from KZN. I'm not certain whether it is elections related, and as we go towards election, should the people of KZN be worried about that? So that's something that the IEC would need to look at. As far as political parties, I think that we would like to see a lot more political parties. In previous elections, we've only seen very few political parties go in, being interviewed, or, in terms of media. When we talk about media, you see a lot more minority political parties not getting a lot of airplay as far as their activities and their campaigns are concerned. Yes, we've seen number of the big parties getting airspace as far as their rallies and their manifesto launches are concerned. Perhaps it would be, it would really be refreshing if we can also start seeing that also for those other minority political parties. I think as far as implementation, it would really be nice to be able to see the field really being leveled, the playing field really being leveled for all political parties and independent candidates that will be participating in this election. But more importantly, I think also people would really like to see political parties coming to the party and not only just talking about what they want to do for people when they are voted in, but where they actually have their performance score, and say, this is what we have achieved as political parties, and we want you to give us a mandate once again so that this is what we need to achieve. So I think there's not a lot of accountability. Voters do not hold political parties accountable, and I think it's time that voters of South Africa start doing that as well. They need to hold the people that vote to them and say to them, you promised 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, why hasn't it happened? And because of that, I'm denying you my vote. Or yes, you delivered on ABCD, and that's why I'm giving you my vote again.
Thank you very much for your time, Lulu. That was Elections Consulting Agency of Africa founder and CEO, Lulu White.